Prince Harry's ongoing descent into total madness has continued overnight.
You know, my jaw dropped. 2 effing grifters. So...
For months, no. For years, one question has refused to die. No matter how many polished speeches, staged appearances, or carefully curated headlines tried to bury it, where did the money go? Not a few thousand, not a minor discrepancy, but tens of millions tied to a global event wrapped in heroism, sacrifice, and public trust. And when the long-awaited documents finally surfaced, instead of answers, they delivered something far more unsettling.
Why would there be so many redactions? Why would anything need to be honestly redacted? This is a charity form. Look at that whole page redacted around the budget. Like, excuse me? How does he allowed to get away with this? But look at this budget commercial blocked out.
Silence disguised as information. Pages blacked out. Entire sections missing. Numbers fractured across categories like a puzzle that refuses to be solved. The kind of silence that doesn't calm suspicion, it ignites it. Because when transparency is promised but clarity is withheld, what exactly is being protected? And that's where everything starts to feel off. Because the question isn't just what's hidden, it's why it needs to be hidden at all. What could possibly be so sensitive about funding meant for wounded veterans that it requires layers of redactions thick enough to blur the truth itself?
Harry blasted, the guy's a hypocrite.
The fragments that remain visible don't settle the narrative, they fracture it further. They whisper just enough to suggest there's a deeper story beneath the surface, something carefully managed, carefully controlled. And when you start connecting those fragments, a pattern begins to emerge, not clearly, not comfortably, but unmistakably. The numbers alone should have been simple.
There is something not sitting right with this charity. Charities that have something to hide should not be trusted, especially with so much NGO fraud being exposed in the last few years.
A total budget hovering around $63 million, nearly half coming directly from taxpayers. Another massive portion from sponsors, donors, corporate giants eager to attach themselves to a cause that feels untouchable. On paper, it sounds noble, impressive even, but numbers don't tell stories on their own, they wait to be interpreted. And when people started interpreting these numbers, something didn't align, because when the spending breakdown surfaced, it revealed something that instantly shifted the tone from admiration to suspicion.
But is it really a charity project at all? Is it just being used as a money-making scheme? Dodgy involvement from the disgraceful Duke.
Nearly the entire budget, almost $58 million, funneled into event operations. A phrase so broad it almost feels designed to absorb scrutiny rather than invite it. Accommodation, catering, ceremonies, marketing, technology, all essential, yes, but all consuming nearly everything? That's where the discomfort begins. Because when an event built around veterans directs the overwhelming majority of its resources toward running itself, what does that really say about its priorities? And then comes the number that echoes louder than all the others, around $5 million. That's what was allocated to long-term support, the part that's supposed to outlive the applause, the cameras, the spectacle, the part that actually follows veterans beyond the stage. And suddenly, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Tens of millions for presentation, a fraction for legacy. Is that balance, or is that something else entirely? Because here's where the questions sharpen. If veterans are truly at the heart of this, why does the financial heartbeat seem to pulse somewhere else? Why does the structure feel less like a direct mission and more like a maze? And the deeper you go, the more complicated it becomes, not simpler. Categories begin overlapping. Expenses appear under multiple labels, the same cost-shifting identities depending on where you look. Event delivery, charitable activity, operational spending. It's not just accounting, it's architecture. A financial structure designed with layers, each one adding distance between the money and its final destination. And that distance, that's where doubt lives. Because when clarity depends on interpretation, and interpretation depends on classification, the truth becomes flexible. And flexible truth is dangerous. So even when figures are technically disclosed, they don't feel revealed. They feel arranged, positioned in a way that satisfies disclosure requirements while quietly resisting understanding. And that's the real tension here. It's not about a single missing number or one suspicious expense. It's about a system where money doesn't move in straight lines. It circulates, it transforms, it disappears into categories that sound legitimate but feel impenetrable. And then the outside voices start getting louder. Critics pointing out the imbalance. Observers doing their own math. Over 500 competitors, $63 million spent, which translates to an astonishing cost cost per participant. And yet, veterans themselves admitting they still paid out of pocket for certain expenses. That contradiction alone doesn't just raise eyebrows, it raises alarms. Because if the money isn't reaching them directly, where is it stabilizing? And just when the narrative seems like it couldn't get more complicated, another layer appears. The definition of charitable activities. A phrase that sounds reassuring until you realize it includes almost everything. Not just direct aid, but the entire machinery of the event itself. The staging, the production, the spectacle. Suddenly, that impressive 92% statistic doesn't feel like proof of efficiency, it feels like a redefinition of what support actually means. And once definitions start shifting, perceptions follow. Because perception is everything here. The public sees a powerful brand, a global movement, a promise. But behind that image, the structure tells a different story, one of layers, classifications, and unanswered questions that refuse to stay buried. And as more people start noticing those patterns, one uncomfortable realization begins to take hold, and just when it feels like the numbers alone have already said too much, the story twists again, pulling attention away from spreadsheets and into something far more uncomfortable: real people, real consequences, and real silence. Because behind all the financial layers, behind the polished branding and global recognition, there are individuals who were supposed to be at the center of it all. And when their experiences begin to surface, the narrative starts to fracture in a way numbers never could. A decorated veteran steps forward, not for attention, not for spectacle, but because something didn't add up, injured during competition. A moment that should have triggered immediate, overwhelming support. But instead, silence, no follow-up, no consistent outreach, no visible system stepping in to carry the burden once the cameras moved on. And suddenly, the question shifts from where did the money go to something even more unsettling: who was it really meant for? Because if the faces used to represent the mission are left navigating their struggles alone, what exactly is the system prioritizing? And that's where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, global recognition reaching its peak awards, headlines, accolades placing Prince Harry at the very top of influential figures in sport. A moment framed as victory, as validation, as proof that everything is working exactly as intended. But on the other side, a growing list of inconsistencies that refuse to stay hidden. Rising legal fees, expanding reserves, new executive positions carrying six-figure salaries, more money flowing in, yet less appearing to flow outward where it matters most. Individually, each detail might be explainable. Together, they form something far more difficult to dismiss, because patterns don't lie, they repeat. And here, the pattern feels deliberate. Income increasing by over 40%, yet direct grants shrinking. Public funding expanding, yet private sponsorship thinning. A structure growing more complex at the exact moment clarity becomes more necessary. And then there's the routing of funds itself, money not moving directly to the cause, but passing through layers of corporations, licensing agreements, and administrative channels before reaching its final destination. Or perhaps not fully reaching it at all. And just when scrutiny intensifies, another detail slips through the cracks. A licensing fee, its exact value redacted, hidden, shielded from public view, not denied, not clarified, just removed from sight. And that single omission carries weight far beyond its numerical value, because when one key figure is concealed, it forces a larger question into the spotlight: what else is being managed behind the scenes in ways the public was never meant to fully understand? Then comes the growing tension around sponsorship. Major partners quietly stepping away, new funding struggling to match previous levels, government stepping in with taxpayer money to fill the gap, millions committed in a time when economic pressure is already tightening its grip, and the optics shift again. Because what was once presented as a globally supported mission now begins to look increasingly dependent on public funds, while private confidence appears to be wavering. And hovering over all of it is the presence that amplifies everything: visibility, scrutiny, expectation. Meghan's involvement doesn't exist in operational details, but it exists everywhere else. In the spotlight, in the narrative, in the perception. And that perception matters, because when a humanitarian mission becomes inseparable from celebrity presence, the focus inevitably splits. Is the attention elevating the cause or quietly redirecting it? That tension doesn't resolve, it builds. Supporters argue visibility brings opportunity. Critics argue it distorts purpose. And caught between those two realities is a system that now feels heavier, more complicated, more questioned than ever before. A system that was supposed to represent clarity, resilience, and direct impact, now navigating whispers of misalignment, imbalance, and something far harder to define. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. all. Not a single explosive revelation. Not one undeniable piece of evidence, but a collection of details that, when placed side by side, refuse to form a comfortable picture. Because every answer seems to introduce another question. Every explanation seems to open another gap. And every attempt to simplify the narrative only makes the underlying complexity feel more intentional. So the question remains, not quietly, not in the background, but louder now than ever before. When millions are raised in the name of sacrifice, when trust is built on the promise of impact, when the world is watching, believing, supporting, is everything truly unfolding as it should? Or are we only seeing the version of the story that was meant to be seen, while the real one stays just out of reach? And if that's the case, how much longer can it stay there?